Are you suggesting that someone's trying to make a real-life sequel?
Stab 2? Who'd want to do that? Sequels suck.
No, come on, man.
Oh, please. By definition alone, they're inferior films.
Bullshit generalization. Many sequels have surpassed their original.
Oh, yeah?
Name one.
I'll be back.
Freedom, you're my older brother, and I love you. But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family you live. Never.
I just can't believe you came here and did it again. You guys give up, or you're thirsty for more?
Welcome in to Season 4, Episode 6 of Duel of the Greats. We have a long-awaited episode for you this evening. I think an episode that we as a group have been building toward for 4 seasons, if you can believe it. For a podcast about movies, we have never had a formal discussion about anything from the Star Wars franchise, which, if you know the theming of our previous seasons, makes sense. But now that we are in Season 4, and we are addressing great original movies followed by an equally great, or possibly better, sequel, it is inescapable that we would not be talking about, or that we would be talking about the Star Wars franchise, Star Wars A New Hope, Episode 4, if you're going in chronological order, and The Empire Strikes Back, Episode 5. So, very exciting stuff here this evening. Before we get started, though, just because we are a movie podcast, and Star Wars, I think for many, many people, is seeing it for the first time is kind of a formative experience. And I think all of us were born after the original trilogy was released. So we all saw these movies in different ways. I kind of just want to go to my co-hosts and just ask about their first experiences with these movies. So I will start with Jeff, who has Star Wars A New Hope. Just very briefly, tell me about your first time watching Star Wars, when you first saw Star Wars.
So my dad was into Star Wars when he was, he was in his late teens when the first one came out, and then his brother, my uncle, is 7 years younger, so he was really into Star Wars when it came out. So when I was a kid, my dad definitely got me started on it right away, to the point where I cannot remember a time in my life where I had not seen and essentially knew everything about Star Wars. I was deep into all the Star Wars stuff. So I often wish I could go back and remember or know what it felt like to get the big reveal about Darth Vader being Luke's father. That would have been such a cool moment. But my first time seeing them, and for most of my childhood, like when we were growing up, there was no streaming, there was no DVDs, there was no Blu-rays, none of that stuff. It was all VHS. And the VHS tapes were so expensive to produce. Not every movie got a release on VHS. That was like a thing. Eventually then when we got into Blockbuster and stuff, movies started, then it pretty much became every movie. But even still, some of them you couldn't purchase. You could only rent them. They would only do enough to go to Blockbuster and all that. So I was my family was always the one that had all the cool cable networks growing up. Everybody liked to come over to my house because we could watch cool movies on HBO, whatever. So, um, Star Wars, all 3 of the Star Wars movies, made their way to HBO at some point. And so my parents, they did the full-on recording. They took a blank tape and they recorded it, all 3 movies. So for the entire, until I was like 10, 12 years old, I think, when they first came. I think it was actually until the special editions that they came out on VHS. Um, or maybe a little bit before that, when they came out on like THX or something. So I was at least 10 years old. But so for the first, bunch of times, I was just watching these recorded tapes. And so just as iconic as that 20th Century Fox logo is on the intro, for me, the HBO logo at the time was also equally as iconic as something I associated with Star Wars because of that tape. So it was pretty cool that my parents did that so that I could watch it essentially anytime I wanted, because a lot of kids couldn't, because like I said, you just didn't have it on video. back then, and then they came out once they did the THX remasters and then the special edition. But so that was my first experience. I always thought that was pretty cool, and my parents did that for me.
Longtime listeners of our show will know that Steve and I are cousins, so we kind of grew up together. Steve, I'm curious to hear what you say about this, just because I have a recollection of you having the original trilogy when they did the big VHS re-release, kind of in the mid to late '90s. I remember you owning those, so I'm curious about what your first experience was with these movies.
Similar to Jeff, I do not recall a time before knowing about Star Wars. It was kind of part of growing up. It was always there. I loved it. It was probably my favorite. As a kid, you don't think about it this way, but probably my favorite IP. I mean, I like you. We didn't have the HBO and all the fancy stuff, Mr. Fancy Pants. I had a copy. We had copies of the movies recorded off of just like network TV at first, and I distinctly remember the first. Well, I don't remember the exact time, but I remember the experience of watching the movies later when, as you mentioned, Nate, we got the shiny gold VHS set. It was the box with all three of them, and
Oh, that was so
there
cool.
was
We still have that at my parents' house. That was so cool.
it's a collector's item.
I know, and it's got the
Um,
3 in there. It was so cool.
yeah, it's cool. Um, but I remember the first time I watched that, I'm like, oh my God, there's scenes here that I've never seen before, because they would edit movies, back in the day to run them to fit into certain time blocks on network television. And so the copies that my mom had recorded, there were a couple scenes that I just weren't in there. Um, there were a couple, I think, about the in Return of the Jedi, like down in Jabba's palace and things like that. And so it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. But yeah, I had the action figures. My favorite were the Star Wars Micro Machines Action Fleet, which had, if you guys remember Micro Machines, those were the tiny vehicles. These were the ones that actually come back, but these are the ones where they're figures that about, I don't know, 2/3 of an inch tall, and then they actually fit in the fighters and the ships and all that. And I played with those all the time. Man, what a time to be alive. And then when the prequels came out, that was just, even before that though, they re-released, as you guys know, the special editions in theaters. And those
97.
are some of
That
my,
was
yeah,
I
those are some of my
my
best
mom
memories going to watch those.
I I made my mom take me to those, and um, she, bless her heart, she did it. She didn't complain or anything, and it was. I mean, she always, liked the Star Wars. She didn't
Yeah,
love them as much as I did, but she didn't mind them. Um, but yeah, it's something that I still, still with me. I'm still a huge fan.
yeah,
I'm
still
as I
love it.
sit in my
Despite
man cave here, I've got like 15 Star Wars Funko Pops in view. I've got the entire Star Wars movie collection in steelbook form behind me. You can't really see it on the camera here, but they're all there. So Star Wars has been a lifelong passion of mine.
absolutely, despite the best attempts to ruin it from all the toxic people online
All the
in the last few years,
all the chuds online.
quote
So
unquote fans.
okay,
But
I was watching this random video. Like, I've used the term chud before to describe certain people that are prevalent on the internet. Do you guys know that's an acronym?
no, didn't know that. What's it
No.
stand for?
Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers.
Oh, is it from what's it from?
So I was watching a YouTube video. There's a YouTube channel called Cartoonist Kayfabe, and they go over just comic books, prominent comic books in history and stuff. They've actually gone over some Star Wars comic books as well. Um, but they were going over a comic book called Ronin by Frank Miller, and there were people that were like living underground, and they would come up and they would kill people and take them down and eat them. Frank Miller. If you're familiar with Frank Miller, you know that's par for the course for him. But and then they said the word chud, and then they spelled it out, and I was like, holy shit, I had no idea. But that word is not in the Ronin comic book. They were referencing it from something else, so I'm not exactly sure
It looks like it
where
was
they
a
were
movie
pulling it from.
in the 80s, starring friend of the pod, well, he's dead, but John Hurd.
Oh no shit.
Yeah. He'd be a friend if he
We'll
was still
see
alive.
him. That's true.
He'd be a friend.
We'll
Yeah.
see him later in the season.
All right. Nate, what about you?
Well,
Yeah.
you
what's your
know,
first?
part of the reason that I really wanted to be the judge this week is, unlike many people of my generation, I kind of grew up indifferent to Star Wars. I certainly now, as someone who loves movies, I recognize their influence and how much they mean to people and how divided fans are on different things. And I've seen many Star Wars films in theaters, a lot of the new ones and stuff, and I enjoy them all. But I always kind of grew up relatively indifferent, so I'm very excited about tonight as the judge, just because I really am going to kind of listen to these arguments and see where we land. So we are going to get started. If you have any comments, because I'm sure Star Wars fans on the internet usually very rational, okay, very calm,
They don't
mild
don't
comment
have-
mannered
very much.
people.
It's a very shy
They,
fan base. They
generally
don't
Not a lot to
talk
speaking,
very
say.
much.
they don't comment. There's no toxicity whatsoever. But if
No.
if a Star Wars fan happens to listen and they want to make a comment, we are Duel of the Greats. You can email
Are there
us
even if there's
duelofthegreats
even
at
any other Star Wars fans
gmail.com.
out there? I've never seen any of
Yeah,
them. I'm not sure.
I don't even know. Duelofthegreats at gmail.com, at Duel of the Greats on Instagram, and at Duel Podcast on TikTok. So you can hit us up anytime. But honestly, I think after this evening, we're going to have these arguments presented, and then I don't think anyone's going to talk about these movies anymore. I mean, once we've decided which one is better,
We're solving
so
it. We're
Definitive.
solving the debate tonight.
I think we're just going to go ahead and resolve it. So, without further ado, Counselor Jeff, you have Star Wars: A New Hope. Would like to proceed with your first point. We are eager to hear it.
All right, and I shall. So Star Wars: A New Hope, the original. Fun fact here: um, the original version of Star Wars that was released in 1977. Um, it did not actually. It had the opening crawl and everything, but it did not actually have the subtitle "A New Hope" or Episode 4. That was added later. I think a lot of Star Wars fans know that, but not everybody does. So that's a fun little fact. But the first reason I'd like to bring up for why A New Hope is the better film is the man, the myth, the legend, Sir Alec Guinness, the probably the best actor in the entire Star Wars canon. And he got an Oscar nomination for Star Wars. No other actor has done that. And when it came to A New Hope, he lent that movie a certain amount of gravitas and a certain amount of credibility, because the rest of the movie was some just a lot of unknown actors. I mean, Mark Hamill was unknown, Carrie Fisher was unknown, Harrison Ford had been in a few small movies, but he was about to quit acting. He was like a carpenter, just working, acting was a side hustle before Star Wars helped his career took off, and he was in his mid 30s. Um, James Earl Jones as the voice of Darth Vader was known, but he was just a voice, and I don't know how common it was to know who the voices were for characters like that at the time. So Alec Guinness, who had won an Oscar, he'd been in Bridge on the River Kwai, which he won the Oscar for, won Best Picture. He was in the movie, and it's actually funny if you read some of the letters that he wrote his wife. He just fucks so poorly in the film. He's like, "This is such a silly picture. I don't know what I'm doing here. Nobody's gonna want to see this movie," and just lots of stuff that it's pretty funny that he clearly had no idea the movie, and nobody did, that the movie would take off and be a sensation that nearly 50 years later would still be a focal point of popular culture. So um it was something that was a really big sort of lightning in the bottle. There have only been a few times that Star Wars or something of that has come along and had the impact that it has. And I don't think a movie like A New Hope can have that impact if you don't have that sort of base of somebody like Alec Guinness who just really ties everything together in the movie, because he's so good and he's so believable, and he really has that sort of weathered look that makes the movie feel lived in, and that makes you think, okay, there is, that scene where he's in, when Luke first meets him and they're in his little hovel, and he's sitting there and he talks about, in the before times, before the Clone Wars, and he's got that look on his face, and it's like it's absolutely perfect, because not only does it have an amazing line delivery there, but then it also sort of reinforces that there's a ton here to this world that we're only just beginning to explore. And that, from George Lucas's standpoint, it's really great to sort of add that in there to just flesh this out. And that was something that he really wanted to do with all the movies, and it really worked out. And when you have someone like Alec Guinness who can deliver those lines, who can, like when he confronts Darth Vader on the Death Star, and he's, "When I left you, I was but the the Darth says, "Oh, when I left you, I was only a learner. Now I'm the master, and only a master of evil." Darth, like, it's just that you feel the connection that he has, and it's really that ties that movie together. And I think, that as good as The Empire Strikes Back is, that's the one thing that's missing. Obi-Wan shows up for a little bit, um, as a Force ghost, but he doesn't provide the through line that he does in A New Hope, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons why, A New Hope succeeds on just a slightly different level than Empire does.
Okay, that's our first point. Steve, do you have a retort or any response to that first point?
Well, I don't want to step on my points too much, but I'll just say, while I agree with all that, and again, these are really tough to do because we love both of these movies and they're both patently fantastic. But I think some of that the gravitas is ironically lent in Empire Strikes Back by a puppet. Yoda kind of fills in, and certainly he didn't win an Oscar, or was nominated for an Oscar, but he does kind of give it an air of the old wizened master that knows what's happening, and not so much in the person of the actor, of course, but just as the character himself. So, it's hard to argue against Sir Alec Guinness, but I'll say that Empire Strikes Back is not totally lacking in that department.
If I can do something unprecedented and give you a sort of help in your argument here, um, while Yoda may not have been
Oh,
nominated, the special effects were, and Yoda
yeah,
was
Frank
part of
Oz.
that.
That's true.
And Frank Oz is nearly as legendary as
Yeah.
Alec Guinness is. Not necessarily as an actor, of course, but just as a person
Sure.
in the film world. So fair enough. Um, but I will continue on to my second point. So my second point, and this actually harkens back to last week even. Um, the Death Star trench run in at the end of A New Hope is just one of the most thrilling and exhilarating scenes in film history. It is it still holds up today in terms of the special effects. Like, you can tell, like, we're so much more used to and so much more aware of special effects now that it's so much easier to spot them, and we're sort of trained to spot them. So when you watch A New Hope, you can tell, okay, it's models and there's backgrounds and stuff. But because of the way it's shot, because of the way it's filmed, it still holds up as something that is genuinely thrilling. And that that sequence, and Luke turning off his targeting computer, and he hears the voice from Ben, and he's breathing and trying to calm himself down, and he takes the shot, and at the last moment Darth Vader's just about to shoot him in his TIE fighter, and then Han comes out of nowhere and saves him, and he lives out this big screen. I'm getting chills right now just describing it. You get this massive explosion from the Death Star, like just nothing ever like that before. And so many films up to and including Top Gun Maverick from last week have riffed on that sequence and have, utilized it as this sort of, touch point where any way, you can, so many people can just will describe certain scenes, like, oh, that's very similar to the Death Star trench run. And when people say the trench run, you know exactly what they mean. It's because it's such an iconic scene and it's so great. And if there's, as amazing as Empire is, if there's one fault, it has its own thrilling moments, of course. But if there's one, I'm not gonna say fault. If there's one thing where I think that A New Hope definitely has over that, it's that really big culmination, that really big, just thrilling ending, um, to sort of culminate the entire story. And that's the one thing that you could argue is missing from Empire. And not only is it there in A New Hope, but it's just done so incredibly well that it's been one of the most prominent scenes in film history ever since its creation, and for good reason.
It's great.
Yes, response.
Uh,
Yeah.
Trench Run is it's fantastic. I do disagree that Empire lacks a climactic moment like that. It's different, but I don't want to get into it yet. I'm just gonna hold that back. Just gonna keep that tucked up like a tauntaun's innards before being sliced open.
And as I said, Empire has its own thrilling moments, but just nothing quite like that. But fair enough. So my third and final point, we'll bring up that A New Hope has, and this goes for basically the entire series, it has the only truly happy ending in Star Wars. Empire Strikes Back ending is very depressing. That's why a lot of people like it. Because it's a very bleak ending, but it's done so because they knew they were creating Return of the, so they knew Return of the Jedi was going to be made, so there was story left to tell. So it's not a, it was a choice to end Empire that way. So I'm not holding that against it necessarily. Um, but then even if you go through, Return of the Jedi, they end, and it's still bittersweet because Luke had to see the death of his father in order for that to happen, right as he got his father back. Then you go to the prequels, and everything about the prequels is bittersweet because we all know what's happening. We know Anakin's going to become Darth Vader. And then you go to the just the sequel trilogy, the most recent ones, they're all this sort of bittersweet because the whole reason the sequel trilogy exists is because the First Order came back, the rising from the ashes of the empire to come back and be this force. And there's just this sort of haunting thought of, oh, is it going to happen again? We're going to have to keep swatting these guys down. But A New Hope just had a truly, we blew up the Death Star, we saved the day, everybody lived, everybody's alive. That's another thing with the sequel trilogy. There was some major character death in each movie, uh, at the end. So everybody, the only bittersweet moment is that Chewie didn't get a fucking medal. God damn it. The biggest oversight that they had to correct in the sequel trilogy. 9 movies it took him, and he finally got his damn medal. And it wasn't even his. Leia had to give her own. Sad. Chewie's my favorite character in all of Star Wars, so that one hits home a little. But besides that, he's still up there with them. He's still hanging out, and they're all celebrating. The Death Star's done. They saved the day. You know, I mean, technically, Biggs, Luke's best friend, died, but we hardly knew him. We hardly knew ye, Biggs. So it's not a, for us, the viewer, it's not as big of a deal. All the main characters, the main component, they're all there. Ben, obviously Obi-Wan, he died, but it kind of felt like that was inevitable. That was a choice that he made, and he was still there in spirit, literally. So, just that happy ending, the ceremony at the end. They had the ceremony at the end of episode 1, sure, but it's bittersweet because we'll be watching you with great interest. Palpatine says to Anakin as he's going to convert him to evil. So the truly happy ending of A New Hope, which is unique in all the Star Wars movies, is something that, as my final point, I think sort of elevates it to being better than it.
Steve, would you like to respond or just
Can it
jump right into your points?
just one response? Can it be truly happy when our hero, the goat, Jack Porkins, dies? I mean, come on. I can't shake him. I
Oh
can't shake
man,
him.
I can't shake him.
We hardly
Last
knew
touch,
ye.
last touch. They came from behind. Oh my god. We could go quoting all day. Steve and I have done this before, but
So yeah, there's a
that's
concern
fair.
that this
That's fair. I
could just
forgot.
evolve
How
into
could I
this.
forget about Jack?
And we'll set aside the Wookiee erasure slash racism. And frankly, I think my best response is just to go into my first point. So, if it please the court.
Indeed, it does, counselor. Proceed.
So the first point is I don't want to say lazy, but I think it's the um, commonly held belief amongst Star Wars fans and probably people that are roughly familiar with, just basically familiar with the movies, that Empire Strikes Back is the, more mature, the darker, I'm going to say more emotionally complex film. Um, as Jeff pointed out, that's not a great source, I know, but generally, if people say, what's the best Star Wars movie? A lot of times you're going to get The Empire Strikes Back. And I think the reason for that is because it hits these notes that A New Hope doesn't. A New Hope is fantastic. Jeff made a brilliant case for why it is fantastic, but it does end on a happy ending, and it's very much a classic kind of hero's tale. Our our protagonists do face adversity, but at seemingly every turn they manage to overcome it. In Empire Strikes Back, we see some real life adversity that echoes what again what people are feeling in real life. The heroes lose the major battle. Our our main protagonist gets his freaking hand chopped off. His best buddy, one of the guys we've been following for how many hours now, 5-6 hours, is frozen in carbonite. It's bad shit. But it's more, like I said, kind of emotionally real. To harken back to something we talked about earlier in this season, it speaks to a certain truth of what it is to be human and what it is to enjoy a story. When our heroes save the day and win and ride off into the sunset, it is great and it satisfies on a certain level. But it satisfies more when you see them go through awful things and know that there is actually hope on the horizon, which I think the very, very end of Empire Strikes Back is actually hopeful. It doesn't end on a bummer note. We have a plan. We're going to go get Han. We're not privy to the plan as viewers, but we know it's happening. We see Lando and Chewie fly off. We see Luke with his hand repaired. And, they open on that shot, or they end on that shot of all these galaxies and the Rebel fleet. And you know that, all right, we've been knocked down, but we're getting back up. And I think that's an important thing to remember, that you can always get back up. And Empire Strikes Back kind of personifies that.
Jeff, your response?
Yeah. So while I do agree that there is some hopeful element, I think to the end of Empire Strikes Back, it's hopeful, as you pointed out, hopeful in the face of adversity. And we know that, yes, we know what lies ahead of them. We got to get Han back. We got to rescue him. We've got to do this. But at the end of A New Hope, what I was sort of arguing for is that there's this feeling we can do anything, we can take on anything, and we're gonna win. That's it's positive, hopeful, as opposed to the sort of hope in the face of adversity of we can right this wrong in Empire Strikes Back. And I don't know that you might be right that it's a little bit more emotionally mature. It's definitely more nuanced. But I think that's an element that a lot of that probably just comes down to perception or preference. You know what you tend to like more from an ending.
Steve, your second point. Steve appears to be frozen in carbonite, perhaps.
Nice
All
reference.
right. Can you guys hear me now?
We can hear you now.
All right. I don't know what happened. Yeah, my guess is about as reliable as a shit. I was trying to think of a good line. Something about a moisture converter, moisture farm on Tatooine, or I don't know. I failed. Revoke my Star Wars card. I was gonna say my number 2 point, Empire Strikes Back wins because this guy. Now, our folks at home can't see this, but you guys hopefully can see Lobot. This sweet, sexy man with the bald head and the cool headphones. That's not really my second point. I love Lobot so much. I wanted to involve him somehow in this. People at home, he's the guy that is Lando's number 2. And I just love that guy. He's no nonsense. He gets shit done. But my true second point is actually that The Empire Strikes Back is that it puts the war in Star Wars, which as a kid, this is one of my favorite parts. And this does come down to preference, but I do think it is something that makes Empire Strikes Back just slightly a bit better. In Star Wars, the first one, A New Hope, we do see a little bit of aerial dogfighting, but for the most part, the trench run is just a couple ships, a couple fighters flying down in this thing. In Empire Strikes Back, we have a full-on ground battle. I mean, we've got essentially tanks, we've got artillery, we got infantry. We see that this is more than just a few guys and ships. This is like this thing is involving the entire galaxy. People are living and dying. This is Star Wars. And the Hoth battle is just, I think, as iconic as Jeff said the trench run is. I think the battle on Hoth is just as iconic. Everybody knows about the big walkers, even if they don't know that they're called AT-ATs. They can picture those guys in the snow fighting. It's just a hell of a way to open a movie, and it still holds up to this day, despite some of the special effects looking a little wonky. And then you have the built-in tension with getting the transports away. It's the whole Hoth battle. Like I said, it puts the war in Star Wars, and it's in the freaking name of the series. So they need to really give you that and deliver on that at some point. And they did first thing right out of the gate in number 2, Empire Strikes Back.
Jeff, a response?
Kind of hard to respond to that because in terms of the Hoth battle, I have no notes for Mr. Lucas, although he didn't direct Empire Strikes Back. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to dispute much of that. It's just a matter of, is the Hoth battle more impressive than the trench run? Which I say no, but again, that's a preference thing.
All right. I'll go to my third point then. It sounds like Jeff's done. Are you okay with that, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
Oh, wise and esteemed judge.
Though
All right,
I'm a little upset earlier that you tried to enter an exhibit that had not been agreed upon by both
I
parties.
was not provided this in Discovery.
I was honestly
moved for a
surprised that there was
mistrial.
no I'm surprised there was no objection, but I was going to allow it. But go ahead and proceed with your final
That
point.
gets to that. It got by on the rule of cool, just because Lobot is pretty cool.
Lobot is a badass.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
The Star Wars action fleet thing we talked about, there was only one way to get the Lobot minifigure, and you had to get the Bespin Cloud car to get it. And the Bespin Cloud car, it's fine, but nobody really wanted that. With the action fleet, you want fighter aircraft and stuff like that. But I had it. I had the Cloud car.
Is the worst ship in the Star Wars universe.
It's pretty silly.
They're dumb.
It's pretty
They're
bad.
little teardrops. It's silly.
Tune in next week for Jeff and Steve talk about. All right,
we're a Star Wars podcast now.
So my third point, I struggled with what to make my third point because The Empire Strikes Back has a lot to offer. I thought cynically, do I just take the route that Nate did last week and just argue about iconography? And I think there's a path there.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Are we?
But to be fair, there is a path there. Think of some of the, think of the most famous lines from Star Wars that everybody knows. No, I am your father. There is another. Do or do not. There is no try. The I love you. I know. I'm altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it further. I mean, these are all Empire Strikes
No
Back. They're a
disintegrations.
no disintegration. I mean, while there are great lines in the other Star Wars movies, I mean, they don't miss in this one, unlike stormtroopers in their aim. I mean, it's just like line after line is just great and iconic. But I didn't want to go there. I did want to bring it up, but I didn't want to make that my point. I also thought about what Leia gets to do in this movie. She's she's a tough character in the first one, but she's she's the princess being saved, even though she does a lot of the saving herself, and she gets to do more in this movie. But I didn't want to rely on that either. So I'm going to go with, what are the two elements of Star Wars? You got Star Wars, fighting in space, which this movie covers. But so do all the movies. And then the Jedi and the Force. Those, I mean, I'm lumping Jedi and Force kind of together as one topic, but those things are what make Star Wars movies, I think. And Empire Strikes Back does both the Jedi and the Force better than A New Hope. You get to see more of what the Jedi can actually do. You get to see Yoda teaching Luke the ways of the Force. You get to see him lifting stuff. He lifts the X-Wing out of the swamp. And then you get to see a lightsaber duel between a wannabe Jedi, he's in training, and a Sith Lord. The lightsaber duel, as fantastic as Sir Alec Guinness is, the lightsaber duel in A New Hope, it's a little geriatric. And, we know it's because Obi-Wan is sacrificing himself, but let's be real. He's not winning any fencing awards for that performance. It was pretty fucking disappointing, if we're going to be honest. But in Empire Strikes Back, we get to see what a super raw but super talented Jedi in training gets to do. And he flips around and dances around, and then you get to see what a Sith Lord at full power gets to do, instead of awkwardly swinging his arms a couple times at Obi-Wan in the first movie. He gets to move around. I'm talking about Vader. He gets to use the Force to pull shit off the walls and fling it at Luke. It's an iconic lightsaber duel. And what is the name of our fucking podcast, guys? It's Duel of the Greats. This movie has a duel that is worthy of our podcast. So that's a long road to get there. But this movie has better Force, better Jedi, more of what makes Star Wars, and it culminates in that final duel where Luke gets his hand chopped off. It's probably the best lightsaber duel in the original trilogy. There's really only like three. You got the one we talked about in A New Hope, which is, again, not much for a duel. You have this one, and then in Return of the Jedi, while really cool, Luke versus Vader on the Death Star, it ultimately culminates without any lightsabers at all. It winds up with the Emperor shooting lightning, and then, Vader doesn't even use his lightsaber to finish off the Emperor. He tosses him down the shaft. So this one is a true lightsaber duel. Lightsaber on lightsaber, and that's what we come to these movies for. And that's what it gave us. And that's what our podcast is named, Duel of the Greats. And so that's my final reason on why you should pick Empire Strikes Back.
Jeff, do you have a response? I don't want anyone to go into closing arguments because I actually have a question I'd like to ask both of you.
Yes. So the only thing I will say is I didn't object to it, but this comes slightly close, and part of it is because I don't know the answer here, but some of it becomes slightly close to breaking rule number 2, because I do wonder how much of the lightsaber sort of, and by the way, it's only disappointing now because we've seen the Duel of the Fates lightsaber battle. You know, we've seen these amazingly choreographed lightsaber fights, and then you go back and you see the first one. But at the time, the first one was just like amazing. Like it captured the imagination of everyone who saw it. So I don't know if that's something where they had more money to pay a choreographer to do a better lightsaber fight in the second movie. That's why, you know, I'm not gonna to call that out as part of that. But you know, it it is a better fight, and I just wonder how much of that is related to the fact that they sort of had a little bit more freedom with it. But to your other point about how the Return of the Jedi fight ends without lightsabers, I mean, technically, so does this one, right? They cut off Luke's lightsaber hand, and his lightsaber falls down the shaft, and you know, then he falls down shortly after it. So it's you know, it technically ends without a lightsaber as well. Not that it really matters because I don't think, if I'm truly honest, you know, the Obi-Wan Vader fight uh, is definitely the third of the major three fights in the first trilogy. But if we want to talk about Duel of the Greats, no offense to Mark Hamill, but James Earl Jones, multiple Academy Award nominee, and Alec Guinness, Academy Award winner, fighting is a better Duel of the Greats than Mark Hamill. And as much as I love Mark Hamill, I still wouldn't call him a great in terms of acting. Not in the vein. He's not in the category of James Earl Jones or Alec Guinness. And I'm sure if he were on the podcast, he would say the same. So I'm a big Mark Hamill fan, but let's just be honest.
I would like to ask you both a question. I'm not even entirely certain what my question is, but I'd like you to both speak to something that neither of you really mentioned. What's interesting about these two movies is that Star Wars: A New Hope exists in its own isolated universe. When it was made, they didn't know they were going to make other Star Wars movies. George Lucas has even admitted and has talked about that the notion of Darth Vader being the father of Luke Skywalker was not something that he thought of or had in his mind when they made the entire first Star Wars movie. That came about when they were developing Empire Strikes Back. So you can watch A New Hope as in its own separate universe where Darth Vader is not even the father of Luke Skywalker. He's just sort of the evil general, the guy that the dark side of the Force is very strong with. I'd like you, and I want to articulate this the right way so you guys can at least speak to it. I'm not even sure what I'm asking necessarily, but what I want you to speak to is this notion of Star Wars: A New Hope as kind of its own isolated universe, and Empire as what is clearly trying to launch a franchise where there are going to be other stories told and other movies, and maybe speak a little bit about that difference of Darth Vader being Luke's father versus him kind of not being Luke's father. He is obviously in retrospect, but really in terms of a story, in the way that first movie's told, he's not really Luke's father. If you both could maybe speak to that for just a moment, Jeff, I'll have you go ahead and go first, just because yours is the first movie.
I, I will try to keep this to just a moment. Now, something that's interesting. So when I was younger, I read Star Wars: The Annotated Screenplays, which any Star Wars fan out there, if you have not read this, I suggest you seek it out and you read it. It's fantastic. It goes through, it's just the screenplays for all the movies, but then it intersperses them with notes and quotes from interviews and stuff from George Lucas where he talks about how the story evolved and certain things like that. So when he was initially playing with the idea and it was called The Star Wars, or The Star I can't remember if it was singular war or not, but um it was going to be a movie about a dad, Anakin, and his two kids. And then that sort of evolved into just, you know, Luke being the main character. And like you said, it wasn't planned in the first one that he was going to be his son, or that Vader was going to be his father. And they put that in. And similarly, the idea of Leia being Luke's sister, that even in Empire Strikes Back, when they talk about Luke having a sister, even at that time, she was still going to be a different character, but they didn't have enough time to implement that and make it feel like it was organic. So they went ahead and made it Leia. So there's sort of a long history of kind of flying by the seat of their pants in terms of the Star Wars universe and lore. So I think it's something that is interesting, and it's sort of emblematic of what makes Star Wars so great, that it's just this it feels like it's ever changing and ever growing, and there's more information and there's more parts of the universe. And so, I think that's what made Star Wars so captivating when A New Hope came out, and when Empire comes out, and it, like you said, it clearly knows it's going to feed into this future sequel, and then possibly more movies after that. It just sort of turbocharges it. So I think both movies are effective in accomplishing that, just in different ways. You've got the fact that they didn't really have this grand idea for 9 movie arc at the time, but they still knew there was more out there, and the fact that it was this universe that was malleable enough to change it to what they did is sort of a credit to George Lucas and the way he set up this universe, and credit to A New Hope as a movie, that it could set it up in a way where all you had to do was say the line from a certain point of view, and then all of a sudden, well, okay, you're right. Vader is his father, even though we talked about him like they're two different people in the first movie. So, you know, I think that's just a credit to how they set up that universe and how it kind of functions within its own rule set.
Steve, comments about my question?
Well, I think it's to me two separate questions, and I'm being honest, I don't have a great answer for either, because I gotta tell you, Empire Strikes Back, I thought about it as I rewatched it as well. It very clearly is the second movie of a trilogy. Um, on any of these sequels, I try to think about, well, do they really, if someone that had no knowledge whatsoever about these movies, if they picked them up and watched them, would they understand what's happening? And arguably no for Empire Strikes Back, but I think people would still have a hell of a good time with it, because the Hoth battle is so amazing. Everything that you get to see, the characters are inherently likable, but you want to see what happens to them. You know, that can be said for the characters throughout the trilogy. So I got to be honest with you, I got nothing on that front, but I think you can't hold that against it simply because it is a sequel. That's just inherent in the nature of this exercise we're doing. Very, very few sequels, I think, would stand completely on their own. One of the best that we talked about earlier this season, Terminator 2, it's the best for a reason, right? We already said that's the best sequel of the ones we've looked at. I think Empire Strikes Back is the better movie than New Hope, but I'm not arguing Empire Strikes Back is the best sequel ever made, just because it very much is part of this. It slots into this canon, and it's the middle piece. As far as your question about the Luke and his father Anakin and all that, they clearly didn't really know what they were doing, until later on, like Jeff was mentioning. Even I looked this up too. Even in the second movie, in Empire Strikes Back, at one point, when Vader is in his weird little room meditating, and the Emperor talks to him, and he says something about Luke. There's a disturbance in the Force. Essentially, there's somebody out there that is feeling the Force powers. And in the edition of Empire Strikes Back that I watched, which is a DVD version that I bought in like 2010, and the edition you can watch just by going onto Disney Plus or any streaming place right now and watching it, the Emperor says something to the effect of, he's the son of Anakin Skywalker. This is before anybody knows that that's who Vader is, of course, in film. But apparently that line wasn't in the actual release. And I don't remember that line from when I was a kid. they put that in 2004, I guess, when they redid the DVDs and beefed everything up. And you know how Lucas is always tinkering with shit. So even up to 2004, he realized, Lucas realized, it's like, we need to flesh this out a little bit more about the background and everything. So all that being said, I don't got an answer for you on that either. I think you raise interesting points. I think they're just, it's a reflection of how these movies came to be. But ultimately, we're here, I think, to decide what the best movie is. I'm not entirely sure. Last week, I was tripped up on the goal of the whole goddamn thing. But I think that's what we're doing. And Empire Strikes Back is better for all the reasons I said earlier.
It's funny that you mention that it's clearly the second part of a trilogy, because spoiler alert for a week later in the season, when we talk about Scream and Scream 2, they actually
Great line from you,
mention
too. Yeah.
what are the best sequels, and then someone mentions Empire Strikes Back, and the Jamie Kennedy character says doesn't count. It's part of a trilogy, and the second part, therefore, not a true sequel. Which I don't agree with that answer, but it's fun. It's just funny that you brought that up, and that is something that people have clearly been arguing for it.
Even more to the point, I could be misremembering, but I think when we were discussing how we wanted to do this season, just in brainstorming, I think we talked about doing like Star Wars versus all of its sequels, and we narrowed it down to just Empire Strikes Back. We thought about doing the
You could have
sequel
even done trilogy
the
versus
original-
trilogy.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Versus trilogy. The three-way
Fun
fight.
fact. Another fun fact. I'm full of them when it comes to Star Wars, but it was only the people that knew Vader was Luke's father. It was only Mark Hamill, George Lucas, and James Earl Jones. And George Lucas put them in a room and he said, "We're the only three people that know. And if somebody finds out, I'm gonna know exactly who it was." Because then on set, the David Prowse, who was in the suit, the line that he delivered was, "Obi-Wan killed your father, not I am your father." And then when James Earl Jones did it, he dubbed that in over it. So some of the, like Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, all them, they didn't know until they saw the movie opening night. So another fun fact for you.
Jaws dropped. Have you guys shown this movie to your kids? Or have they been spoiled?
No,
tried
Ellie's
so
probably a
hard,
little
and
too
I just
young
can't
to
do
get
it.
into. Yeah.
Brandon,
Millie,
I'm curious. Did your
Logan,
boys
Brandon's not a Star Wars guy.
Logan, I am not, but my kids, Austin's like, whatever. Logan loves Star Wars. He's watched all 9 movies, I think, multiple times.
Did he know about the, Vader being Luke's dad before he actually saw it?
Nope.
Did you like sit there and watch him and see what his reaction would be?
I did, but he's a very like neutral reaction thing. Like we watched, kind of off topic, we watched Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy tonight before we recorded, and I hadn't seen him emote so much during a movie because I knew he would love the character of Marvin, and I was like, it's good to actually see you like show like emotion during these things, but no, he actually, I think he likes the first prequel, or he liked the prequel more than I think he liked the original 3.
That is not an uncommon sentiment for kids of his generation, which is weird.
I like the
what's wrong with kids these
I like
days,
the
damn
prequel
it?
before I like the original 3. Having said that, I didn't see the original 3 until after the first prequel movie came out, and then I was like, I've never watched Star Wars a day in my life, and I'm like,
that's crazy.
15
That's
years
crazy
old,
to me.
and I had seen so many movies. Like, I understand the cultural relevance of why Star Wars is so good, but having seen it post all the shit that inspired it, and growing up as a Star Trek kid, I didn't see the thing of it.
That specific scenario, if you can find a way to live however long you did without seeing Star Wars, but it kind of reminds me of, I've seen people before talk about like The Exorcist, and to me that's one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. Horrifying movie.
Because we saw it when we were kids.
Well, yeah, but people say that they'll like, people be like, "Oh, I wasn't scared at all by The Exorcist. I thought it was funny. And some of that is just like, internet tough guy type act, but there's also an element of just like The Exorcist, not quite at the level of Star Wars, obviously, but has sort of permeated pop culture to a way that, like, even if you haven't seen it, you feel like you have
Hmm.
because you've seen, the scene where like her head rotates all the way around in The Exorcist in 1973 when that movie came out, or 71, I can't remember when that came out, but no one had ever seen anything like that. But it's been parodied so many times that you're sort of trained to think of it as funny, and it's almost there's sort of an element of that with Star Wars where it's been around so long that there's a familiarity there even if you haven't seen it. I wonder how much that would impact like a first viewing, as
Yeah.
an adult.
I mean, Logan liked the trilogy, the original three. But I think he liked the prequels more. And it was 73 for The
I mean,
Exorcist.
they're unrestrained in the best and the worst way possible.
Yeah.
So I can see why, especially as a young, you'd think they're so much fun because there's just
Yeah. And
wonky, crazy
had I
stuff.
watched them when I was younger, I probably would have seen that. But like I said, 15 years old, probably 1996. I'd seen all the shit that it inspired. Special effects were better now. Like, just I feel like it inspired such good storytelling that by the time I saw it, I was like, I don't see the hype. But as I got older, I understood. Okay, I get the references to all the shit I did like was inspired by this movie, so I can give it the props it deserves from that. That doesn't mean I like the movies.
The
I'm even wearing. I
comparison
forgot
I
to
heard.
mention. I'm even wearing my Star Wars headphones. Forgot to mention.
It's dedication.
The comparison that I heard one time from a content creator, I can't remember who it was now, that I thought was very interesting, was he said the difference between the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy is the sequel trilogy are better films, but they're bad Star Wars films. The prequel trilogy are bad films, but they're good Star Wars films in the
I can see
sense
that argument.
that the mythology of the prequels is stronger and dare I say truer. We've been in trouble with that word a little bit this season, but truer to kind of what the notion of Star Wars is and the story of Star Wars, even though they maybe don't feel like they are made as well and probably not as well acted. Um, Whereas the sequel trilogy, I think the movies are pretty well. They're pretty spectacular, and they're put together in a very real way and in a great way, but maybe don't expand on the mythology in the way that people appreciate as much.
Well, and
So
we've kind of had movies like this with similar other directors that we've talked about. Nate, you might even argue about this for like Casino for Martin Scorsese, right? Like the prequel trilogy for George Lucas highlights all of his strengths and all of his weaknesses. It's like the the idea making, the world building, the special effects, the ingenuity, all that is there. The dialogue, the character development, the all that stuff is not there, just like it, so it everything that he's great at is on display full on in those like the pod racing sequence in episode 1. I mean, that holds up and that is, you know, I it made me think of the chariot race from Ben-Hur. Like it was a phenomenal
yeah,
scene.
yeah,
Um but then, I hate sand. It gets everywhere. Like it's just
yeah.
this there's yeah. So it is kind of an interesting little juxtaposition there, but I can see why, why you're talking about that.
It's literally what I think of Godfather 3. I think that Godfather 3 is a good movie. I just think it's a bad Godfather movie. Like that
I agree.
that's sort of how I think as a standalone movie, I think it's well made. I think it's well acted. I think that it's an objectively good movie at the very least. I just think it's a bad Godfather movie in
If
terms of the mythology
90%
of the Godfather.
if 90% of other directors in the history of film had made Godfather Part 3, it would be the best movie they ever made.
Yeah,
But Francis
easily.
Ford Coppola, it's at a minimum, it's the third best movie he's ever made, and probably further
Yeah,
down the list for him. So
yeah. Oh, Wait further. I mean, Godfather 1, Godfather 2, Apocalypse Now, The Conversation. I mean, hell, The Outsiders. I mean, is a better movie, than Godfather 3. Um, but I think that I'm stalling is what's
It's
happening
decision
now,
time.
and I think it's time to make a decision. I have made my decision. Um, and I really, no offense to anyone, I really did. I'm basing my decision on who I think just made the better arguments tonight. I'm not sure that it's necessarily the best movie, um, but I thought that one person here argued their points a little bit better, and but there's a caveat to this. So let me reveal my choice, but then I'm going to say something. I am going to side with Jeff tonight and pick
Oh,
Star Wars: A New Hope.
there we
I
go.
think that his arguments were a little bit stronger. However, Steve, you are vindicated. I've been holding this back. The public response overwhelmingly on your side. The far and away the hardest split we've seen, a 90 to 10 split on the socials for Empire Strikes Back. So I think that tonight Jeff's arguments were a little bit stronger. I'm still not entirely convinced that Empire maybe isn't the better movie, but this is a hard choice,
It's
guys.
it's it, this is very similar to Godfather 1 and 2 for me. Like I
Yeah.
grew up and it was Empire all the way. And then as I got older, I started gravitating back towards A New Hope. I don't know that I can articulate and tell you why. Like I know with Godfather 1 and 2, I just had a greater appreciation for Marlon Brando's performance for whatever reason as I got older, but I can't necessarily tell you why I might have gravitated towards A New Hope later on in life, but it's sort of how it's happened. But yeah, I mean it's hard. Like depending on the day, you might I might say Empire's better. Some days I might say Star Wars, but these two are my top three, along with Last Jedi as I get ready for to be crucified. But those are my top three Star Wars movies. So from the whole canon.
I mean, my favorite Star Wars movie is Rogue One. I mean, it's honestly not even a little bit close. I am a huge Rogue One stan. I absolutely love that movie. Um, my favorite piece of Star Wars media. Um, so there you go. Steve, I can tell, is just pissed. He's sitting there, frozen in carbonite.
Flowering.
Um,
we can't even tell if he's frozen or if he's just angry.
No, not piss. I just don't understand. Like last week. Although last week Jeff just got it wrong. This one is it's hard to say. Both are pretty close, but I don't
Well,
know.
well,
I
now
mean,
we have to decide
the
those.
people spoke.
But now we have to
that's why
decide. Steve, you already.
I was trying to vindicate you a little bit with what the social response was overwhelmingly on your side, just without hearing any arguments. Vast majority of people think Empire's better.
Um, quick question too. As far as how you frame these questions, do you say which do you like better or which is the better movie?
Which movie's better?
Okay. But now we have to decide. And Steve, you already sort of gave your vote, but is Empire so Godfather Part Two was the best sequel, obviously, for the first couple weeks. And then we decided Terminator 2 was a better sequel than Godfather. Again, this is not saying that the one movie is better than the other, but just if it's a better sequel. So between Sister Act, Top Gun Maverick, I don't think we've either of those replaced Terminator 2, but does Empire Strikes Back replace Terminator 2? I think there's a legitimate argument here. I'm not even sure where I
For
come
me,
out on this. What do you guys think?
for me,
No, I don't
no.
think so.
The only reason I'm saying that is because how I'm grading that question is Terminator 2 is, for me, a really far superior film to the Terminator, which itself is a great movie. And so I don't know if we've experienced another sequel yet that, and Empire certainly expands on the mythology. I'm not saying it doesn't, but Terminator 2 really expanded on the mythology of the Terminator franchise in a way that I don't of the sequels we've talked about so far, I don't think any sequel has done. For me, Empire is not a better sequel than Terminator 2.
I would probably agree with that. And I do think this is where the argument comes in, where it being uh, the middle part of a planned trilogy, or at least
Yeah, exactly.
an Empire was made. It was planned to be the
Yeah.
second part of the trilogy. So um,
Steve
I do
is
think that
thinking
makes it
again.
so.
Steve is hard to read tonight.
Oh, that's the technical difficulties. No, I like I said in the argument, I think it doesn't stand up necessarily on its own two legs outside of the trilogy. So I think to be a good quote unquote sequel, it also has to be rewatchable and understandable and bring people into a franchise that have never seen another movie. And this one doesn't do that, I don't think, as well as, well, not really at all. So I think Terminator 2 is still atop the pile there.
And just for a recap now, so after 6 weeks, we've got the original at 5 wins. Terminator 2 being the best sequel, it makes sense because that's the only sequel that we've
Yeah.
actually voted to win. Um, and I mean, it's not as much. This season is sort of not as much about the competition as previous seasons have been. So even if the original dominates, we'll still continue out through the whole season, of course. But I definitely see an avenue for some sequels to make some headway here because we got some really good
Yeah.
sequels coming up.
Yeah. Well, including next week when we will talk about, I think, just as esteemed as Star Wars Godfather.
Easily.
When you hear these great original sequel combos, you immediately think of Shrek. Who doesn't? Um, and so Shrek versus Shrek 2 will be next week. I know our viewers, our listeners are excited about that in much the same way that they were excited about this week. Um, lot of firm opinions on the Shrek
Nate,
series.
you're gonna have Shrek, and Steve's gonna have Shrek too.
Yep.
So
So yeah, it's
it's
going to
gonna be
be
a fun one.
really gonna be exciting. If you have comments about, and I'm sure you will because the judge here has gone against public opinion, please email us, duelofthegreats@gmail.com. We are Duel of the Greats on all of these social medias, except for TikTok, where we are at Duel Podcast. And if you have been listening this far, we certainly appreciate it. We will, I mean, again, I just have to come right out and say, if we ever get an email, we'll probably just read it. I mean, we will call you out on air. We would love the engagement. Truly, though, if you are listening, thank you to the people who voted. We actually had a lot of people, a couple hundred people vote on this on both my socials. So thank you for voting if you were one of the people who voted. And if you gentlemen don't have anything to add, I think we will call it a week.
I'm
I
good.
see, I
Sounds good.
see shaking heads, so we will say that is a week. The original wins out again, and hopefully the sequels can pick it up next week. Thank you for listening. This is Duel of the Greats.